It's in the next 12 to 18 months going to be just hammering the traditional economy. So people who are set on classic paths to job security are cooked.
I'm worried that it's the ultimate tool for authoritarians, which it is.
The big takeaway for me was that these efforts to set up free areas by funneling money into a predestined spot were exactly the wrong way to start.
You need to learn how to scam the system here and how to beat the system, because the system is really not good for you.
There's an anti-fragile relationship. The worse areas get, the more people are going to innovate and create safe havens that can be the springboards forward.
What's your rough CV?
Well, my lodestar has been seeing ways to turn failing systems inside out, and to do it in a way that frees the world to the direct benefit of the poor. I come from a left background in terms of my teenage years, and then read Rand and decided, whoa, I was off base. But in terms of values, I've been looking and working on projects that do share the upsides and have success sharing elements. And so I've had some divergence from the traditional enclave approach to free zones. And I adamantly free market, but also looking for ways that land value gains can be shared.
What about an actual CV of projects? Like, did you start in the free zone business?
I came into it as a teenager, and it was publishing. At that point, I thought that what the world needs is free market journalists. And so in high school, I put out some libertarian magazines, and they caught the eye of the founder of Reason magazine, Lanny Friedlander. And he contacted me. I volunteered to do paste up work. Reason had 300 subscribers. But there was a life-changing moment in Lanny's apartment. He was a truck driver during the day and doing this libertarian magazine on the side. He had a collection in the cardboard box of newsletters about libertarian efforts to create new countries. And so for an 18-year-old, that was just a life-changing kind of discovery.
Can I ask when you were an 18-year-old, just for context? I know you're not, sure. Women, you're not supposed to answer their ages. No, we don't care, do we?
That was 1969, 1970 was when I became active with Reason. And I was just actually graduating from high school and heading into Harvard. So Lanny said, I can't pay you, but I need your help in the production. So why don't I make you publisher of Reason magazine at that tender age? And that was what I did for a stretch of about a year. But Lanny opened my eyes to Mike Oliver and his Minerva project, and Werner Stiefel and his project Atlantis. And these were extraordinarily audacious efforts to create truly free societies.
Right. We've never, I don't think, mentioned those in 180 episodes of this podcast. So
Whoa.
Let's go there. They already sound good. Atlantis sounds really good. But what are we talking here? Like, were they all sort of ideas and no substance?
Oh no, these were on the ground efforts, and I'm sure there are many hours worth of adventures and tales to be told. But long and short, both projects came from people who had deep scars from World War II. Werner Stiefel had seen firsthand what Nazism had done, and came to the U.S. with a life vow to never let states run rampaging again, if he could help it. He founded a pharmaceutical company, and part of the proceeds went into building a boat that was then landed at a seamount off Haiti, which unfortunately Papa Doc and his minions decided they weren't going to leave it alone. So actually the boat kind of sank before it reached its destination. But he kept looking and ultimately refocused on Central America, but very quietly. The other thing I found in these newsletters was Mike Oliver, who at age 13, during the Holocaust, he lost his parents, and he was in the Polish woods with partisan group, and he came out of that alive, and again adamant about not letting governments ever do that again. So he made a fortune in Las Vegas or Nevada real estate, and then proceeded to look for islands that would lend themselves to a free country. Starting in the Bahamas, Abaco was his first. But as I read these newsletters and got up to speed and followed closely in my college days, he settled on the South Pacific, and there in Tonga, he did raise a flag, again on a seamount, and had the war canoes or navy of Tonga promptly eviscerate the little structure that they'd built on the seamount. He turned then to the New Hebrides under British enjoint rule and found an indigenous leader who drove a bulldozer, but he also had high standing with the tribe on the island of Espiritu Santo. So Mike Oliver created passports, flag, a constitution, radical constitution, and Jimmy Moley Stevens declared independence and sent emissaries to the United Nations. By this time, I graduated from college and was working in New Zealand and wrote the lead article in the New Zealand Herald announcing the birth of the Ngākri Federation in late December of, good grief, I'm going back in time, but this would have been 1975. And over the next months, as a reporter working in New Zealand, I saw the sad story of this thing fall apart. Basically, the millionaire backing of this breakaway got defeated by some adroit maneuvers by the British and the French. So they put Jimmy Moley and Stevens in jail, and he got released about 6 months later after agreeing never, ever, ever to do anything like that again. And my visa was expiring, so I decided on my way back to the U.S. to stop at the site of the Ngākri Federation. I met him and saw that the money that was being spent to back him had turned into a conspicuous consumption binge.
By him.
By him. And so as I was leaving the scene and seeing how much great promise had gone wrong, I had an epiphany in Fiji on the way back to the U.S. And that was the seed of what later turned to be my life's work of setting up free zones, but on a different basis than the kind of parachuted in ones that I had seen.
What would you say was your modus operandi then, when you say a different way of doing things?
Well, the first realization was that many free zone initiatives have been pushing on a string. They've basically fallen in love with a particular location and then push, try to make it happen. And it's all sweetness and light in the early days. Oh, yes. But once local folks know that you've chosen that destination, then the banana peels start to appear. And so the big takeaway for me was that these efforts to set up free areas by funneling money into a predestined spot were exactly the wrong way to start. And in Fiji, I recalled a conversation with a friend who had been at Harvard Business School while I was an undergrad. And Paul Siegler said, you know, commercial space launch is going to be a big thing. And he intended to be right at the beginning of that. He said, we need a place at the equator, because at the equator you get extra spin, and that saves you a good 30% over the launch costs from traditional sites. So as I was sitting in this kind of ragtag motel in Fiji, waiting for my plane the next day, I thought, what if something of the audacity and scale of these new country projects could be turned into a prize to be won? And that's where it clicked. I figured that what would excite countries to give land, leasehold land, in large scale, and agree to match Hong Kong or Singapore in terms of transparency, the quality of the business climate, to land the first spaceport for Earth. And this wild idea, actually, with next to no money, over the subsequent 2 or 3 years, had quite a run, 12 countries. I got some very big name people to agree to endorse it. Bucky Fuller, Arthur C. Clarke helped fund, Robert Heinlein, a number of people
funding
in
the
aerospace
prize.
Agreed to put their name or provide seed capital. And I had, with a microscopic budget, $800 in terms of the initial budget, prepared a brochure that then went out describing the benefits economically and also other upsides in terms of prestige to the country that would commit the best quality reforms on a very tight turnaround. So, Tim, to my delight, I founded Jim Bennett, joined me. He later became quite active with ideas on world cities and free areas. We sat there in this really, low rent kind of area in Santa Barbara, getting phone calls from ministers, ambassadors wanting to fly out and meet with us, and letters that said, in principle, we're prepared to do it. So that was my first big light bulb in terms of a new way to do the free zone initiative, create competition for people to come forward.
So this was land-based, right?
Yes.
Because I know that I know Joe Quirk talks a lot, and a lot of seasteaders talk a lot about the fact that what's that area in the ocean that's very shallow? The
Sargasso? No, not the Sargasso Sea, but there is an area that's free of hurricanes,
and it's on the equator. And a lot of them talk about that as being a really good business model for large seasteads, is places to take up. So what happened? Did anyone commit, and did anything happen?
There was a resolution introduced by Liberia at the United Nations declaring that they were ready to go ahead with a 200 square kilometer free port for space. This would be an area that would be open to commercial, peaceful launching from ventures around the world. And at that point, McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, as well as a West German company, a launch bootstrap company called OTRAG, all were wanting to launch vehicles from the equator. So it was very heady times. We built up a good head of steam on this. And then a guy at the State Department said, cool idea, but it ain't going to happen.
Which State Department?
The U.S. State Department.
Right.
Two reasons. One, in the Carter administration, the space shuttle was not particularly keen to have private launch competitors. Reason number two, which had some validity in terms of apprehension, is that launch vehicles can be turned to civilian, commercial, peaceful use or something else.
Right.
And the notion of having a easier on-ramp for emerging countries to lob things into orbit, that was a big deal, and understandably. But the point that we tried to make, which did not carry the day, was that these things will happen anyway, and they can be much better done in terms of avoiding leakage risk if there's one or a small number of equatorial free ports that can, be vetting what's going on in terms of the launching.
So let me just so I got this straight. So you were offering like a prize, the prize being a massive amount of investment.
Well, the prize being that if you do follow through with prime site and world-class reform commitment, that the prize is that you will become this launch pad for planet Earth, and the commercial ventures to.
And the US state put an end to it.
Yes.
This episode of the Free Cities podcast is brought to you by Veritas Villages. Now, Veritas Villages are freedom-oriented, energy self-sufficient luxury communities designed for people who want to enjoy peace of mind and real freedom in today's unpredictable world. Join a community of like-minded neighbours who value privacy and independence in a place where you can use Bitcoin, including for the purchase of your property. www.veritasvillages.com/free cities for more info, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation. And who were the main contenders before that happened then?
Liberia by far.
Wow.
We did have Panama, Indonesia, Rwanda, and almost 12, a total of 12 countries showing written interest in it. But after the State Department said no to export control of technology, Liberia was still ready to go ahead with the free port. But then their cabinet met a grisly end when a sergeant, unpaid sergeant, took over the government and marched them off to the beach.
I've been to Liberia. It's one hell of a failed country. Hold on a second. I'm just going to close that curtain there. The sun keeps coming in. There you go. It's amazing to even have curtains that big. Sorry. Brand new studio, folks. This is all, nothing gets cut in this show. Yeah, it not that I would have imagined that maybe it might have been a complete disaster anyway. It's one of those countries that I think is rife with just bad people doing bad things in power, basically. And the whole country can never really seem to get going because I worked there briefly and the corruption was rife. And it was a bit on display to us as people from NGOs. And it was just like, what the hell? This is, But the whole place is just a quagmire, disaster. Like, I think I was talking about this on the podcast the other day. The capital, Monrovia, was a slum, apart from one 5-star hotel with all the white Toyota Land Cruisers outside, which were all the NGOs, and the offices of the government, which were walnut cabinets and flat screen tellies, and and you could just see it. It was like a painting. Here's where the money comes from, and here's where it goes, and it was just like. Yeah, I left. That was one of the last times I worked for an NGO. The whole trip left a bad taste in my mouth. I was out there for 3 weeks,
Well, I went on to work in well over 100 free zone projects. I regrouped after getting this Earthport project stymied, and focused on free zone consulting. I wrote or co-edited books on foreign trade zones, enterprise zones, and export processing zones. I had a hand in a guidebook on that. So I became an expert at the tender age. I guess I was 28 or so at that point. And calls started coming in for various projects to help countries get free zones off the ground. So the next chapter in my life began, excuse me.
It's consummate professionals here at the Free Cities podcast. Yeah, put it on airplane.
I hope. Unbelievable. Excuse me.
You're like that meme. I get it from my kids. It's what old people do when they touch their phones, doing that.
It's utter panic mode.
How do I do this?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that. I try and resist, but
Anyway, that does segue me to the next episode because that may have been a telemarketing call. After running into all these running into this firestorm of regulatory issues, I went into a tame, vanilla free zone consultant mode, and got a call to help a project in Jamaica, which had in Montego Bay a prime site for a free zone. And it happened that I had just weeks before getting this call seen an article called "Now We Can Move Office Work Offshore." And being a light bulb.
This is 1980s.
1983, right. I guess.
So just so I can get my timeline right, Shannon, what was happening in China at this moment?
China actually was just embarking in the late 70s on setting up Shenzhen, which was far from a central, top-down thing. They realized the frustration and a fishing village of 30 to 60,000 people got autonomy to experiment with new rules. So they were just beginning at that point. And in fact, one of my earliest consulting projects was to go to Shenzhen. I think it was 82. And even after 3 years of reform, this basket case area was sprouting skyscrapers. And it was quite phenomenal. But these were manufacturing oriented. And the thing that tipped me into my next generation of free zone projects was reading this Wall Street Journal article about office work going offshore. So I said to the Montego Bay folks, we'd like to try a market survey and test the waters for how much of this information industry market will respond. And it was extraordinary. We contacted 100 potential firms, call centers, very much among them. And they were so ready, even before this zone had any structures for them. They wanted to be first into that area. And 2 firms out of the 100 we contacted set up shop with data processing, offshore data entry operations.
And is this purely a financial decision when it comes down to it?
Back then, yes, but a little bit of hedging risk, because when you have your customer service contact centers all in one place, anything can happen to it. So part of the market was you can have a second center. The cornerstone for this was to get telecom prices way down. And there, in this recommendation and market research, we said, please get your monopoly prices down to market level. And that turned out to be a pivot. 2,000 jobs came in, largely in inbound and outbound call centers, claims processing, and so forth. So within a short number of years, we had this next generation of free zones moving from the traditional logistics and apparel assembly, electronics assembly base like Shenzhen, to a service industry, knowledge industry free zone. So that was a very heartening.
And is that still going?
Yes.
What's it called?
A Montego Bay free zone.
Wow, it's still going now.
And it gave rise to various offspring, because what soon happened, as free zones are wont to do, when somebody's got a quite big success going, neighbors want to do it too. So Dominican Republic, at that point, I think had just 3 or 4 traditional free zones, but they decided to gallop in and with private sector investment and management, set up world-class free zones, including ones for teleservices. The big next evolution was, by the way, the Dominican Free Zone decree, it was not legislation, said that it would allow private competitors to the monopoly country system to set up shop in the free zone. So it was extraterritorial in that way. And that then led to Uruguay setting the gold standard for this next generation of zone. They, by law, put in a single paragraph saying no commercial government monopoly shall apply within the free zone boundaries. And that turned a cow pasture near Montevideo Airport into now Zonamerica, having approaching 10,000 people in very high-end work, including software development, largely because the telecom price and the exemption from the power monopoly and insurance monopoly made this the place to go. And it also added into the mix by right, companies that want to bring in talent from overseas, up to 30% of their workers can come that way.
Can I ask a question? Back then, were you envisaging the evolution that we now see of zones? Was that, you say you came into it from a sort of libertarian perspective.
Yeah.
So was that always in the back of your mind?
Yes.
That idea that, look, you can't go from here to there without going via here, which is free zones, manufacturing, information, whatever, and then all right. Well, how about people living there then? And then, or how about
Right. Well, this in the early '90s, when this was going very strong. In fact, in Israel, for Israel, I pulled together a whole bunch of video clips from companies for a free zone project there by very free market folks, saying that if the government removes a monopoly on telecoms, these video clips from companies that were employing, thousands, tens of thousands of people, said, if you do this to world standard, we can see a scenario where we can create 500 jobs or 1,500 jobs, or it depended, but it aggregated to 10,000 jobs. And putting that together took maybe 5 or 6 months, but it led to the passage of what was a world-class Free Zone Act that then was rescinded when Rabin was killed. But through all this, I learned the value of having very anti-fragile approaches that didn't take for granted that what governments put on paper would actually be honored.
So what are the main components of that anti-fragility then, would you say? Legal, I presume.
Well, interestingly, I do think the most important way to avoid the kind of blowback that many free zone projects have had is by designing it from day one with shared upside, meaning that the private risk-taking capital that comes in gets, its full freedom to make money, but under a build, operate, transfer agreement so that it aligns the incentives of host country stakeholders and the community residents who otherwise will feel, hey, this enclave is not.
Sorry, you're going to need to repeat that. I didn't.
Sure.
So for you, this would be one of the most important premises for setting up a free zone, according to you.
Yes.
Go on, say it again. Then I wasn't following that well enough.
Sure. First, make sure it's a prize to be won, that you're not locked into a location and pushing on the string. Make it a competition with something that's so invaluable to the country that's chosen that it will be very generous on a short timeline to make the kind of commitments of land and policy reform.
Really? So what, using the same model as your space?
Earthport,
really?
the Earthport project.
So you what do you say? Okay, everyone, here, I can probably get a lot of investment. Give me your best shot, kind of thing.
Right. But to tie it into what Peter Diamandis calls a massively transformative purpose, meaning a project that is so connected to very big splash upsides in whatever field of technology, one can put together. That makes it something of prestige value.
So you're talking about the government showing off about it, basically.
Well,
other
that's a
governments.
big part. Exactly, that's a big part. We don't want those sons of bitches over in that area to get this prize. We want it.
Oh, right. You mean internally in a country? I thought you meant you were putting it out to tender for other countries.
Exactly.
Right, but this one is
it works at that level and also in terms of in-country site competition.
They do that. I remember that happens in England. It's like you get different cities pitching for whatever.
Right.
Right. Like the new Millennium Dome or something or whatever. We
So-
don't get free zones, unfortunately, but
The Enterprise Zone Initiative did have an element of this because when I was recovering from the Earthport lesson learned, I was helping the Reagan administration. We produced a guidebook and model legislation. The core strategy we recommended was don't make this a by right entitlement. If enterprise zone legislation passes, make it very clear it will go to those states that go the farthest to lower taxes and lower these other barriers that hold back entrepreneurs. And that prospect of a federal level contest for designation led to wholesale adoption of the legislation that a libertarian lawyer, Pete Ferrara, drafted by the state of Kentucky. Unchanged, word for word, a very radical free market package, but with an element, and this comes back into the present day too, an element of sharing the land value upsides with the residents and with good causes that they care about. So it became a way to lever commitments from state and local governments to commit land that was idle property into effectively land trusts that would share dividends to the residents of areas that might otherwise have gentrification, displacement issues.
I was going to say something along the same lines. When you offer out a zone to tender, so everyone sort of like bids on it in a way, all these different, presumably you run the risk of alienating parts of the country, and this is one of the things I've heard people criticize free zones with. It's all very well to create a free zone in your country, but what about the places that don't get the free zone? Because they suffer on account that business, it's not just necessarily new business coming into the free zone, it might be business in their place moving to the free zone.
Yeah, there is certainly, depending on the quality difference of the business climates, there can be redirection of capital. But the big driver of free zones, the best of them, is entrepreneurial talent. Silicon Valley succeeded not because giant companies chose it, but because it had the elements for startups, micro-enterprise, garage scale
Why
ventures.
why did Silicon Valley get so successful then? I mean, presumably nice weather, nice place near nice places. It's a massive part of it.
Yes, indeed. And there was an element of partnering with Stanford. The Stanford Research Park is, I think, an example of how land that's held by a powerful local stakeholder can be multiplied manyfold in value once you get the not only the business climate working well, but getting human talent highly tuned to what the market wants. And that's one of the innovations that the technology park in Silicon Valley, that first one, did, was to tightly link the kind of courses and professors interacting to the benefit of the tenants of the park.
Did the park have any special rules and regulations?
As far as I know, no. But this gets us to a frontier area for free zones. I think we're in a world now where the competition among different projects is largely not what official taxes you remove, but what are the implicit taxes that you remove. So many opportunities exist, even in places like the EU that have harmonized, harmonization policies on taxes and regs. The competition field now becomes, how can we get the dead weight, the drag on people's lives, and especially their entrepreneurial ventures' lives? How can we bring that to as close to zero as we can? Administrative bottlenecks, red tape, corruption, things like crime, depending on the location, these weigh super heavily into the location decisions and the ability of bootstrap entrepreneurs to actually grow their business.
I have to say, though, I mean, I'd like to hear your view on this. The EU or Europe, there is I have personally, and I talk to people about this stuff all the time. I don't know anyone who has any interest in doing anything in the EU. And so why? And so even the thought that maybe free zones might help the EU, sure they would, 100%. People, it's a joke now. It's a running joke that the EU is people have ideas and then the EU just stop them.
Right.
It's so they need them, but there's absolutely no way they take them.
Well, here again, it comes to the question of how do you change the political landscape so that instead of objecting to enclave-style zone initiatives, turn into a race to say, yes, in my backyard, we want this thing.
Good luck with that one.
Well, as it happens, there are vehicles that can change the mood music. And one of them is to have build, operate, transfer pre-commitment.
What does that mean?
Build, operate, transfer is a way that ports, airports, other infrastructure projects are attracting billions of private risk-taking capital. What they do is say, we will come in and put in this airport, this port, and run it on a progressive transfer of the asset to the local counterparts. So that changes the reflex in some cases to say, this is no money out of our pocket and it's potentially big upsides in terms of the asset value. And having vehicles like land trusts, Hong Kong and Singapore, Macau, lease land. They don't sell it. And the revenue it collects in rent, these places collect in rent, is proportional to how much confidence there is in the business climate. So it aligns the politicians in favor of simplifying life. And this makes a precedent that even in places like Eastern Europe, you can set a proposal for a leasehold, not alienating the land, but leasing long-term, and having transparent auctions and tenders to draw in the capital to build in areas that are now struggling.
Is that that's the opposite of what, I mean, I don't know if this is true because I've never really talked to someone who knows, but I've heard that China invests in, I'm thinking places like Sri Lanka, a lot of Africa.
Yeah.
I've seen,
Built,
yeah, they own, right? They're not leasing. Is that right?
That's not right.
Oh, okay.
They're typically, my understanding is long-term lease.
Right.
And this, of course, is how Hong Kong got going, a 99-year lease.
Oh, yeah.
And so some of the Chinese projects do have very long leaseholds, but they're not, to my understanding, outright ownership, which is important. I think in the case of Sri Lanka, they went a step further. I wrote up a paper for Cato a while back on debt for freedom swaps. So yes, China is setting up these outposts worldwide and indebting or driving countries deeply in debt. But in Sri Lanka, they negotiated a debt to equity conversion, which was to say, we will tear up the IOUs in return for a concession, a limited duration, but a concession to operate the port. And that has makes a precedent that as the world, drowns in debt, that can be applied again and again by free market folks.
And you'd call that win-win. So China brings in the capital.
Right.
Sri Lanka gets their port without paying for it.
Right.
But over the long term, claw back their asset.
Yes, under pre-agreed.
They make money.
Yes.
They make more money as time goes on. Right.
Right. So now how can we line up these the billiard balls to get as much out of it as possible? Well, I think one way for sure to build a big constituency for the success of these free market zones is to have the land trust model and land lease model flowing to the immediate and direct benefit of regular folks. I think Nevis, there have been direct dividend talks and
talking about destiny.
But the idea of having learning vouchers, micro-vouchers, that can essentially open access to market-based learning and market-based healthcare. These are things that from day one can be part of what I would call a lead with a gift bundle.
Well, I actually, over the episodes that we've been talking about this stuff on this podcast, I've been putting together my absolute necessities when you do this stuff, and one of them is exactly that: ways to protect your zone. Legal, obviously, and that's really important. And you get that right, as we've seen here in Próspera. It worked. Amazing. Socialists came in, didn't do anything. Kind of did something, but it didn't shut the place down. Secondly, though, only to that really, and almost as important, is keeping everyone happy who lives there and who lives next door to you. And I think, funnily enough, Próspera didn't do that really well to start with, possibly. They did it. They did do it well. They just didn't outreach. They didn't communicate it well enough. They didn't hurt anyone. They didn't destroy anything. They didn't break any rules. They didn't go against anything they said. But they didn't stop the rumor mill. And I think slowly now there's been a change, because I think people are seeing the benefits. Like if you're from Crawfish Bay or whatever, and you work here and now you're doing well, and now your neighbour says, and there's a job going there, and that slowly changes the public opinion. But I would say that's second most important thing,
Yep.
because it's actually a protection against getting shut down as well.
Yes.
You know, legal protections are great, but when you've got the community behind you, that's even better. That's a better incentive model in many ways for a government to not come in and shut you down.
For sure. And these catalysts, these micro stipends or micro vouchers, can open up day one access to telemedicine resources, for example, to get second opinions. In the case of learning, education, there's already vast amounts of free content available. But what's not so accessible are credentialing projects, work-study projects, virtual internship opportunities. And this is where free zones have a huge potential, because through digital networks, they can offer, in partnership with telecenters or whoever the cell phone companies are, they can offer on-ramps for people to stand out, not just, oh, I took this course online, but actually I did, and here are links to a portfolio showing what I did to apply it for the benefit of my friends or my neighbors, my whole community. And this gives a chance, again, you mentioned spreading virally. It gives a lot of opportunity. The micro-vouchers, which I helped launch in Sri Lanka with entrepreneurial schools in poor areas, were $30 each.
So hold on a minute. How does... I had another question first, but I want you to explain to me exactly what a micro-voucher is as well.
Sure.
But I was more thinking about, in the case of outreach to the community, would be build a hospital in your free zone that the community can use.
Yes.
That's kind of what I was meaning. But what do you do with micro vouchers? What do you mean that locals get a voucher for being nearby or something, and then what?
With the Horizon Lanka School, a poor village right at the front lines of the Civil War, we found a exceptional bootstrap entrepreneur who'd set up an alternative to the public schools. And he had gotten various contributions of computers and whatnot. But the kids that were in there, and this was middle school age into high school, the kids were still relying on very ad hoc kind of learning. So we made a standing offer to the Horizon Lanka. We'll set aside money for a dozen micro vouchers, micro stipends, to encourage kids to teach kids using course material that they prepare, PowerPoint presentations or quick animations.
What's the point of the voucher? This is the bit I don't understand.
It's to say if you, the entrepreneurial school in the community, would like to offer more than you're doing to the students and families, we will pay $30 for each completed online learning lesson that they create. And dozens of these little PowerPoint presentations explaining, this in algebra or that in science, the kids put together. And this is an example of how to build a credentialing portfolio that the kids who otherwise would just be taking exams and whatnot.
You're into competitions, aren't you?
Yeah.
That's another version. It's a repurposed version of, instead of here's some money, go and teach the kids. It's like, here's some money that you can earn by learning that thing and passing it on to your contemporary.
In ways that are shared. And this village had never had people get into university before Horizon Lanka. By the time we finished with our micro vouchers, the graduating class, it started with 7 people under a tree when the school was launched. The graduating class, 3 out of 7 of this graduating class got accepted in universities in Sri Lanka. And there was a video on YouTube of Craig Barrett, then the head of Intel, hearing about this and meeting the graduates and saying, if you guys don't want to go to Sri Lankan universities, Intel will pay for your college education. So these little tiny catalysts can have dramatic effects on people's futures.
But it's about creating an incentive model that's slightly different to a lot of people's idea of coming in. And I think a lot of people look at free zones and think everyone's going to act like economists think they're going to act, and they never do. Obviously, it's all bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit. Some of it signals as sort of roughly correct. But what you're talking about is creating an actual incentive structure that promotes a free. It's like a free market of you're bringing in the free market. And letting people join in.
That's right.
Basically.
In Kyrgyzstan, in 2005, in 6 months, and with a very small budget, I was brought in by the Academy for Educational Development to figure out how they could spread grassroots learning. We wound up creating micro-voucher prizes that would be earned by 4 villages to be determined that committed land, a land grant endowment to endow the scholarship, and partnered with an entrepreneurial telecenter operator, cyber cafe kind of thing. In this very tight window of time, with the kind of workshops and the buzz creation, 50 villages put in bidding to receive one of the top packages of micro-vouchers. And 25 of them had applications including photographs of the sites that they were prepared to commit. Ultimately, 5 were chosen to receive $20,000 worth of micro-vouchers. And within another 8 or 9 months, 9,000 Kyrgyz had come to telecenters to learn the basics of how to go online, do email, web search, and so on. And then a Singaporean telecoms entrepreneur came in and funded 16 in total of these e-centers. So it works if you create a prize to be won.
And what does the invest? So the Singaporean guy's coming in to make money.
That's right. With telecenters,
And the telecenters as in the call centers?
No, telecenters meaning cyber cafes, basically.
But is that a big business?
Oh, very much so at this transition period. They were the first access points.
So in this particular Kyrgyzstan case, do you have to create a free zone for it or not? No.
Well, I mean, interesting question. Yes, under the original frame, the 3 things had to be put in. There had to be a risk-taking entrepreneur willing to be the center point, a land trust or a land grant commitment where 10% of the future land rent would flow back into the micro-voucher fund. Third element, policy reform. Guess what? Since USAID was putting this up, and USAID had, thanks to a 60 Minutes or 2020 feature, banned any geographic targeting of tax benefit, tax relief. That third element of this project was knocked out. So what we could have had was a very vibrant competition to innovate in how to simplify, taxes and regulatory burdens. That was ruled out. But
that wouldn't have been on what is it, federal level then? Does they have that would have been on local?
Right. We were encouraging local innovation to improve business climates.
So in that particular instance, the idea is, right, we have a Singaporean entrepreneur who wants to make a bit of money. He's in he can set up internet centers. You say to the country, right, this guy wants to come in and do this. If you can provide land and you take 10% of the revenue from that land, he will bring his capital and create this thing, and you get education out of it.
Yes, but the Singaporean guy wasn't in the picture. The first round of competition was for 5 spots, simply with the catalytic micro-voucher offer.
But where did you get your collateral from then?
That happened later when the response was so vibrant. It got somehow to the attention of a Singaporean.
No, I mean the original ones. Who pays for those?
The original micro-vouchers?
Yeah.
I am sad to say it was your tax dollars at work through USAID.
Oh, okay. Right.
But it was done since my consulting practice, about 70% was doing World Bank and USAID work. It was done with, unfortunately, tax-funded money, but it was done in ways to create a breakout from subsidy through the land grant endowment.
Give a man don't give a man a fish. Give a man a fishing rod. That was the idea anyway. Yeah, God, that all went a bit tits up, as we say, didn't it?
Well, I'm all for being a radical libertarian. I'm all for it not being funded by taxes.
Yeah.
And I do think we're at the cusp now of another turning point. And this is where there's a little side note I should have inserted in this. By the mid-90s, there were online free market projects that were setting up gig economy opportunities. And so I was very early in with Phil Salen, who founded the initial market of its kind, to test out micro-entrepreneurial paths for people offshore to come in. And so I had a remote secretary, Camille Crichton, in the Caribbean.
In the 90s?
Yes.
Wow,
actually, even a little before, on a one-to-one basis, I worked with Camille from late 80s. But this notion of a big shift away from having free zones depend on mid-sized companies or big companies to making them magnets for talent to come and access global free markets. Today, Fiverr.com, freelancer.com have well over 40 million registered freelancers. They're free to join. And they compete in reverse auction markets to do transcription projects or whatever.
Gosh, I've never thought about that before. It puts the network state to shame, doesn't it, really, when you think about it?
Well, the talent pool is there, and two huge changes have taken place. One is that in the early days, people coming in had a reasonable shot of landing work. But in a reverse auction market, even though the price is almost giveaway, to start earning reputation, 80% of the freelancers who come into these markets never land a single micro project.
Right, because
nobody
seen.
wants to trust an unknown talent.
But I thought, because when I've ever dipped my toes into those kind of worlds, what tends to happen is the winners put their prices up.
Yeah.
Which is an incentive to look for someone cheaper, right?
Yes.
And there's probably there's at the edge of the market. There's probably a bunch of people just trying new people out all the time,
Exactly, and some of the better innovators in the space form freelance subnetworks through this talent pool.
Sure, yeah.
So they're presenting a single point of interface, but then farming it out. Well, so just to go back to the talent that's available to free zone, free city initiators, immense pools of talent, hungry talent, that can be mobilized for whatever specific things are needed. But the second thing that's not, unfortunately, it wasn't in the picture, but now is AIs are just sweeping out a big, giant rug pull of these on-ramps for micro entrepreneurs. So that brings us, I think, to what this next giant opportunity is for free zones. The talent that's available in these online markets has been doing manual services. But we're now at the cusp of seeing AIs transform field after field. And so the opportunity, as I see it, for win-win-win is for free zone initiators to offer micro-vouchers that help talent globally and also in the region that they're working in, help them get their first experiences with AI, delivering value. And so we have a B&B rental business in Virginia, and we are setting aside now, quote, neighborhood share, about 10% of our earnings, to feed into micro-vouchers that will offer first experience with AI opportunities for people in the community.
Where your Airbnb is?
Yes.
In
yes.
the US?
Yes. And I am here in part, I just came back from Portugal where we have a similar offer to fund work-study projects. Again, scale, $30, $50, but they're released when the student or the job seeker has uploaded onto YouTube or TikTok a summary of what they've done with AI to benefit either their own life or the life of their friends or the life of their neighborhood.
So that it doesn't. That's the prerequisite for getting the voucher.
That's right. That's
and
right.
Who judges that?
Well, while it's still in
who
early
would?
pilot,
Right, okay,
it's I guess my call. But we're doing this in order to see how we can create a very replicable open source precedent.
So how, but the bit I'm struggling with is why you need a free zone or a physical place even for this.
Okay, this gets to this cascade that's coming, what Peter Diamandis and company have called a tsunami of AI. It's in the next 12 to 18 months going to be just hammering the traditional economy. So people who are set on classic paths to job security are cooked. And that applies as robotics come in to physical things. It certainly applies to a lot of the knowledge work. Where is the money going to come from as we see costs plunging in goods and services thanks to this wave? It's going to come in the form of experiences, in the form of hosting places that are great spots to visit and grow, learn and new things. So this is where I see the future of free zones. It's not the traditional kind of factory or office cubicle job creation. It's going to be much more creating environments of safety, of conviviality, and of serendipity, tuned to, like your daughter you mentioned is very much into horses. Mm. So free zones in the future, to the degree one wishes to share one's own values and aspirations with them, will be able to use AIs and the kind of quality human contact that makes for an experience that is a keeper.
Well, let's use my daughter as an example then, because I'll explain what we were talking about last night when I met you. But my eldest daughter is I've just been looking at another video of her riding. She's got a horse. She loves it to bits, but she learnt through a neighbour of ours who's got lots of horses about natural horsemanship. Natural horsemanship is a very specific way of training horses, and it's very different from the way that we train them in the UK, which is kind of based on military training of horses. You kind of beat them into submission pretty much, in a way. Not literally beat them, but natural horsemanship is about literally learning how to be a horse around your horse and create a relationship. It's incredible. Wow. It's absolutely incredible. It's incredible. And the most famous proponent is a guy called Buck Brannaman, he's a US cowboy type guy who can, tame you get a wild Mustang and within 20 minutes, this guy's kind of got him just standing around and walking around. He's an absolute, and there's a lot, and it spawned this kind of industry of, well, not even industry, there's just culture of natural horsemanship. Now, of course, my daughter, she's only 13, she can't study with Buck. She really wants to, and I showed her how to use AI because I use it a lot. And one of the first things she did, because she had some, and this came out of a genuine need. It wasn't just a little experiment. She was struggling, really struggling with some things with her horse. And I don't know whether you know young girls and horses. Yeah. It's painful, emotionally painful. It's a really hard thing to not be getting what you want out of your horse and stuff. So she got the AI to learn everything about Buck Brannaman, because there's a lot of it out there. He's been in films, he's got his own website, there's thousands of videos of him explaining how to train horses, whatever. Yeah. She directed an AI at him. That's water coming out of pipes, by the way. It's an interesting place, isn't it? This is just a noise. And said, right now, from now on, talk to me as if you're Buck Brannaman. Wow. And it worked, because she said, okay, when I'm riding, and I don't know. She knows way more than horses than me, but she would have questions that I would have absolutely no idea. And I felt it's a hard thing to be a dad to a 13-year-old girl, and you can't answer her questions. Yeah. But she would ask Buck, and the AI spoke to her as Buck Brannaman, and as far as I can tell, was spot on pretty much every single time. Wow. And that's what she does now. Wow. So she still wants to go and train with Buck, and she still wants to go out to America. He's still alive. You can go and you can do a workshop with him, and she still wants to do all that. Yeah. But she has solved some very serious problems that she had that were causing her absolute heartbreak and distress by using this AI.
Well, the Alpha School, and I gather we have a graduate of the Alpha School at this conference. I have yet to meet, but they were on a podcast called Moonshots. Peter Diamandis, Alex Wisner-Gross recently had the founders of this company, and they have come up with a highly game-changing way to do education that's super attuned and personalized in a manner that can scale, and is scaling now. They're opening up a lot of places. These entrepreneurs have a setting where they hire teachers not to teach, but they're hiring highly skilled motivators, coaches, people really who are sensitive to what each individual in the class is doing. And for 2 hours max, people do academic work, but this time it's being delivered through AIs in a game-like way, using the characters that that individual learner admires most. So it means the Buck, the avatar of Buck, with obviously the permissions all having been given, is explaining trigonometry or
right.
Krebs cycle or some such, in a way that's super attuned to be in the zone, not too hard, not too easy, but in that state of flow that good games have. And that is leading to 3x, 5x improvements in skill levels, with the rest of the day then open for whatever you love to do. And so you've got a community now in these alpha schools of kids in the peer culture of one where they're mutually supporting and exchanging updates and high fives and whatever as they hit their milestones. But the reward for doing the milestones is they have time to do what they love to do.
What is the difference between that and just getting the latest version of ChatGPT, paying a subscription and asking it the same thing? Are they training their models? Are their models isolated and they're training them in a specific way? Or
they do have, they've done the first step toward an open source, a version of what they have. But it turns out that the human presence and caring is it way surpasses just having the course, interactive course.
So
experience.
explain the difference, explain the AI part and the human part. It's taught by a real human.
No, the real teachers are there not to teach, but to know enough of the landscape, the domain, to be able to encourage or make suggestions on how that individual learning then should ask Buck.
So like
this kind
how
of
to
a
prompt,
question.
really.
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's a complete reshaping of
Okay,
learning.
of course, I've got so many questions. Number one is, I still don't understand why that's the future of of zones, because you could do that anywhere, right?
Well, this gets back to what happens when bots, physical and virtual, are doing the stuff that had been the mainstay of free zone employment. In terms of industry, the apparel assembly, the electronics assembly, that's going. And in terms of call centers, another huge factor. That's now being done better by utterly realistic AIs.
So sorry, so the reason you think it's the future is because free zones need a future. And this is one, it's not, I mean, because when I think of Próspera here, for example, the regulatory autonomy they have obviously attracts business. Right. So it's, but that in itself is a characteristic of a free zone in a way.
Yeah.
But so what you're saying is you wouldn't give them any special, like there wouldn't be anything different between the alpha school in a free zone and the alpha school
outside?
Yeah.
Well, if there are barriers, and a lot of the alpha school kids are launching ventures that are making money.
Right.
So this becomes a way for people who care about having a future, their kids having a great future,
right,
and being in a peer culture. This becomes an added magnet to attract global talent. And then the kids themselves, springboard into entrepreneurship as a result of having the self-confidence, having the portfolio of cool projects they've done. They become bankable. And one surprising thing of the Moonshots podcast, David Blunden, who runs a VC firm at MIT, in the MIT area, he said, what we're looking for now are not people who have this grade or that diploma. We're looking for people who have actually done stuff, uploaded things that we can look and see the quality of what they're doing on GitHub and repositories, or the videos that they created. That's one. But the second thing is, rather than bet the farm, and these are micro bets increasingly, excuse me, we want to find friendship networks where, like, the roommate scientists that have gone on to great things to launch ventures together. This kind of environment of having early experience with building your trust nets and having people who share your excitement and compliment you and skills, they become much more bankable to attract seed funding than, or even full-scale VC funding, than do the current approaches to venture funding. So this means that the zones can stand out in terms of the quality of the whole person that's being formed, and these become pathways then for a proliferation of entrepreneurship, which I think is going to be the future for free zones.
Well, exactly. It almost certainly is, because who would want to be an entrepreneur for example, in the UK now? No, I mean it.
Right.
I know we laugh about it, but
Right.
I have no interest in entrepreneuring in my own country at all.
Yeah.
Not a small bit,
Yeah.
because I know what a waste it would be, and eventually, even if plus the opportunities elsewhere are too inspiring. I think that's a lovely idea when you think about it. If you're teaching, I mean, the problem, and as you were speaking, I was just going through it in my mind. It's quite a sad state of affairs that basically what a lot of free zones, or like say Próspera, what Próspera's actually doing is just stripping back the entrepreneurial landscape back to something that's actually quite good, and it always used to be. I mean, you imagine arriving in America in the 1700s or 1800s or something, and that was the land of like opportunity, and then 200 years later, 300 years later, you've got this place in Europe which is the complete opposite, or in my country, which is and where you want to go is the frontier, where there's opportunity again. And if you were learning it from a young age, and you were incentivized to work on a project, which I agree, the best learning experiences my kids have is when they're making a project, not when they're being taught anything. I agree with you. That whole system is almost just backward now. My kids go to, we homeschooled them for a while, but they're at school now. And when they come home, I mean, we always tell them, my wife doesn't always like it, but I'm saying, look, play the game, but know what's going on. And, because originally when I first started using AI a few years ago, I was like, look, you can just completely scam the system here. And most people think, well, you shouldn't, because you've got to be learning. I'm like, no, actually, as I went on, I realized, no, you should. You need to learn how to scam the system here and how to beat the system, because the system is really not good for you. I can see it now. What is good for you is using these tools. And everyone's trying to be moralistic and saying, oh, you can't do that because it's not. But in 10 years' time, it's like when they invented calculators, it's like, oh, don't use that. You've got to learn how to do it in your head. And now someone's doing it 10,000 times faster than you.
Jensen Huang, who I think was founder of NVIDIA, had a wonderful, comment on this. He said, I want everybody in this company to learn how to use AI, but to use AIs in terms of adversarial contests between themselves, because there you do get the next level of skill and insight by seeing what the strong points and weak points are in these AI-generated systems. And so that, again, comes back to a very live current interest of mine is how can we make essentially the game-like battleground dashboards where people early gain skill, not relying on one AI, but rather taking multiple AIs of their choosing and learning how to
hit them off against each other.
Exactly.
That's an interesting thought, though.
It.
I almost certainly don't understand AI well enough, but every time I have had a very heavy week of use, I realize that this thing's out of control, it's too good. And for example, in that situation there, I wonder whether you even need to pit AIs off against each other, because an AI would already understand that it could pit itself. It could pit it off against itself, presumably. I don't know. Like the worst thing about AI and all the sort of folklore around it is just the wild predictions and accusations and you know, that go along with it. And I really haven't got a clue. People say, you mentioned 18 months. You know, in 18 months' time, X, Y, Z will be happening. And I don't know whether that's going to be true or not. I think it's tempting to think, we'll all be out of a job in 5 years. But it's also not as well. And I don't really know what the answer is. I know that on the whole, when people panic about something, it's not something that you need to worry about. Normally, you know what I mean? Like if there's oh my God, this is the next big thing that's going to happen, you can normally chill out about that. When it dies down, you didn't get affected by that point. Or, you know, climate change is going to kill us all in 10 years, you know. Okay, I think we're going to be good. We're cool. We don't have to worry too much about that. Those kind of things. And I think history's proven that right. Most people tend to flip-flop between different things that they worry about. But so in that sense, I'm not too worried about trying to understand the future of AI, because we're all trying to position ourselves, aren't we?
And the question then becomes, how do you get ground truth? Because AIs, more and more content is created by AIs, and they're hallucinating 5-10% of the time. So they're eating their own tail, you know, chewing up the hallucinations and then regurgitating out with new hallucinations. So there have to be proving grounds for the AIs, and turning them into competitions for prediction. If Próspera changes this aspect of the onboarding experience, you know, you have 3 or 4 AIs saying, we predict that's going to lead to this increase in terms of visitors, or that increase in terms of number of e-citizens. These are ways for AIs now to show that they can make changes. And the rule sets, because the zones can offer clean rooms for policy innovation, it creates a potentially self-reinforcing cycle of evolution where the AIs get better proving grounds, and the rule sets that AIs are helping to suggest, you know, have real world, you know, side by side proofs of which one is doing it right or better than the other.
What do you think are the most important things for a zone to offer? To people, I mean, I'm talking about Próspera here. I'm talking about these kind of zones, not necessarily just a free port or something. Yeah. Where we're at now, which is the latest iteration of what we would have called economic zones, free zones, is zones where people live, work, and benefit from all the things that zone has, the special permissions and stuff. So what are the most important things to offer people?
I think there is a vacuum to be filled of massive transformational change for the better. They're not understood in the public view as being enablers of a gigantic leap that people can relate to in terms of change for the better in their lives. Yes, the argument about better governance is there and is very credible, but it is not something emotionally that most people are attuned to enough to invest in understanding the innovation. But people do understand their health span, whether their kids are in a soul-destroying setting or not. What kind of things can be done better in terms of building the kind of skills of conviviality that Jordan Hall and others have noted. These things are reaching straight to the heart of people everywhere. And so far, I think there's been a lack of communication and a lack of clarity on how massive change is going to unfold for the better as a result of what's happening here. And this gets into being a proving ground for bold ideas and linking with people who are well known, who are opinion shapers in different fields. Because if they come into contact with projects like Próspera and say, this pipeline of life-changing education opportunities and health improvements and innovations in affordable housing, these things this is the place that it's setting the proving ground for the rest of the world. This kind of thematic specializing, I think it lends itself not to say one zone is the source of all this stuff, but rather if there are complementary networks of very high-profile, admired people in 20 or 30 of the leading areas of hope for the future. This is the way that these zones can go beyond the enclave kind of way of being and become a common pool resource for humanity in ways that will, in fact, open a lot more profitable opportunities to expand and spread.
Right. So, sum that up in real terms.
Right.
Like I'm starting a new. I've found a great location. I've got a state on board. Mm-hmm. I've got the opportunity. Mm-hmm. What do I need to do? What do I need to offer people? Literally, what would be in my manifesto for trying to attract people?
Well, if to take one of the greatest areas of state failure, which is education, to go to 4 or 5 of the world's leading initiatives to break out of the dysfunction and say, we would like you to set up a proving area that will be where the most scalable, world-changing innovations that you got can be shown. And we're prepared under the scenario to share the upsides. If your successes here magnify the number of people coming, the companies being formed, the value of the land in a specialized section of the project, we want these to be flowing back to you or to good causes that you choose. That way, having world-leading innovators in environmental initiatives, in health, in education, name the field that is going to be transformed anyway, find the early movers and the most admired people and have them set up their dream proving grounds and pilot areas. That I think will enlist a lot of people who are now on the sidelines or, no, I don't understand it. But if these are areas that connect with people in their heart, that will help grow.
What about, though, the big, I think, problem, one of the major problems, mm-hmm. is attracting people to physically move.
Yeah.
And especially families.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that attracting digital nomads is good. It's part mm-hmm. of the process,
right.
but it's not a long-term strategy. Right. It's about local people. I suppose in that sense, education would be a great way to do it. But I often think as well that as long as you offer a better standard of living inside your zone than outside your zone, a cheaper, better standard of living, which is inevitable, really, then you normally can't go wrong with locals.
There is a trap in that model, which is the better you make it, and let's say it's the classic artists, the first movers into distressed areas, they make it cool, and then the rents go up, and out they go. There, to my mind, is a huge frontier also that free zone pioneers can innovate in, to vest those who do add value to the quality of life and do make life more affordable, to share in the upsides, because the land values always capitalize these intangible improvements. If it's super cool neighborhood, up goes the land value. If it's a super safe neighborhood, up goes the land value. Same with education. So the innovators and bootstrap entrepreneurs who are behind many, if not all, of these kind of disruptive changes for the better, if you don't have a way to vest them with a share on dividends of land or land trust rights, these things keep the starving artists who are adding value on board instead of throw them overboard. So that would, I hope, be part of this package.
What do you think Prospera's doing right and wrong then, when you look around here now? I take it you've been following it for a while.
I have, and I think the original let's go all in on one location, I had, in conversations with the early team, encouraged them to create a competition or contest, prize to be won. But by that time, they were so committed here, and understandably, it's a gorgeous place. They didn't have the same leverage to have multiple sites competing to land them as the project. So I think that was something, in retrospect, I would have certainly hoped could have been done differently.
Well, I mean, they can definitely do that now.
Yes.
Yes. Próspera isn't even a physical location. It doesn't have to be.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the other missing ingredient is a bundle of day one benefits. Whichever direction they go, whichever partnering sites or spin-off sites get created, to change the understanding of that community as to what's in store. It can be changed the way the Phoenicians built trust in setting up the first free zones. 3,000 years ago, it was a mess in the Middle East. And after the Hittites and the Egyptians had fought themselves to exhaustion, these traders out of Lebanon, the Phoenicians, said, well, let's go shopping for trading partners. And the way they did it was they'd load up their boats with samples of their wares. And just as night was falling on an unknown territory, they wouldn't go straight into the village, but close to the village, they would row in and leave a bunch of goodies of their trade wares on the beach. And they would light a fire and then row back. And the next morning, the villagers come out and, my goodness, look, the gifts on the beach. What do we do? Well, obviously, lots of them would just take it and bye-bye. The Phoenicians head onward. But what happened often was the villagers would respond with their own gifts on a beach. And so this would then prompt the waiting Phoenicians to row back in and start trade. And this was how trust was established in a very low trust time and environment. And it can happen today too. So I would hope that Próspera and other free zone ventures that want to spread will look at early wins where they can, through micro-vouchers, micro-scholarships, things that give people day one, limited, but day one actual access to surprising, unexpected benefits in telemedicine in terms of their preparation with work-study projects, launching into online markets with AI help. These kind of things can be done at trivial cost and reach hundreds of people from day one. So I would hope that that kind of virtual gifts on a beach can be added to the mix. And also a vision and a path to sharing the upsides in terms of land value with people who make the region, make the area safer, more beautiful, more inviting to visit.
And when you say land value, like take Próspera as the example. Próspera, this particular site here where we are now, they bought that land.
Yes.
So what you're saying is originally, if they had bought the land and then the previous owners of the land still had an option, or not an option, but how does it work? They're just a percentage.
Yeah, a percentage revenue share is one way to go,
But
straight
revenue
off.
share, right?
But with
Because land value itself, you can't, unless you sell the land, it doesn't have any value, does it?
Not true. Hong Kong and Singapore won't sell land. They'll lease land at tender, open, transparent
I see
tender.
what you mean. It comes so that the original owners of maintain ownership
Exactly.
just on a very long lease. Okay,
Exactly. And this aligns everyone's incentives to say, let's make life easier, not more uncertain for the folks here.
It's a great idea, but I think I'm thinking that your average VC wants to buy the land, doesn't he? Or she.
In the U.S., yes, but certainly in Asia, this model, which has worked beautifully in Singapore and Hong Kong, Macau, it's very much part of the landscape there. And I think that's a way in a time of heightened polarization and suspicion of billionaires and tech companies and whatever. That's one way to create.
Except, though, on the whole, I mean, I don't know whether this is just universally true, but I suspect it might be. Someone who buys, like when you buy a plot of land, often it's owned by one person.
Yeah.
I mean, even around here, who knows?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know about what went on when they were buying it, but it might be that the whole of this side of Próspera was just owned by one family. You don't know.
Right.
In which case, that doesn't really solve the problem you're trying to address, which is don't alienate the community.
Well, I would say there's a trade-off between going for the nominal paper ownership and limiting one's ability to expand. That's, I think, what's in the cards now, versus creating a transformative prize to be won. Multiple communities with prime sites vie to be offering you the policy reform, not only for the initial project, but for expansion, 10x, phase 2, expansion, 80x, phase 3. There will be, as institutions break and people start looking for better pastures, there will be huge opportunities for vast amounts of prime sites with world-class reforms to come to you rather than you chase, push on the string in one particular location that gives you a piece of paper saying, you own it. So I would love to see Próspera and others shift to the opportunity to grow 100-fold or more, not only at their initial location, but in expansion locations.
So, right, we'll wrap up soon. What are you working on right now, you personally?
Yeah, I mentioned the micro-vouchers. We have this B&B, it's a B&B through VRBO. where we do have a revenue flow from it, and we want to now pilot these micro stipends in our neighborhood and offer also virtually opportunities for people to say, that's a pretty dilapidated brick wall downtown here. Here are ideas for murals that you could do. And so these little bitty micro projects I'm working on now set up a template.
You're not consulting on big projects then anymore?
Informally, I continue to advise, but I'm much more interested in how do we roll out the grassroots change and turn people who are now skeptics or opponents of these innovations into participating in the upsides. Not everywhere in the world, but in areas that will influence the world. So I'm looking for that. I've recently returned from Portugal, and we'll be doing some of these next generation micro-vouchers with the community there. So yeah, that's been one of my interests. My great abiding interest is seeing us reframe individualism and capitalism in ways that kind of disorient the opponents of free markets. And the vehicle for that, I think, jives very well with what is this emergence of a world of abundance, a post-scarcity world, where free zones can be early movers in showing it works. And I think the way that'll best happen is if we have new definitions of self-interest. Ayn Rand influenced me a lot early on, but I think her super narrow definition of individual self-interest actually is not in one's, at least my, self-interest, because our larger self, our empathic self, has room for causes and people and projects that are part of us. And so things that benefit these, what's within our boundary of the expanded self-interest, are as nourishing and enriching as the narrow self-interest. So having then a way for AIs and social networks to see people whole opens up huge opportunities for exchange, gift exchange economies, basically, to enrich our self-interests in these enlarged ways. And that I've worked out a paper that just came out in a book in Germany. It's in German, but the translation is freedompreneurs. And my chapter on AI is how can we create better ways to show our true selves or higher selves with AI. And it's in English, that chapter, so I'd be glad to send a link to anyone who's interested in that.
Sure, I don't know whether I'm on the fence about AI in the sense that I think it's great and I think it's terrible at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think it's great because it's helping me every single day. Yeah. I feel neutral about it because it seems to be, it's doing too much. Right. I'm noticing that there are parts of my personality, parts of my modus operandi that are disappearing, and I'm not sure whether that's healthy. Sometimes I think, it's like my muscles are withering. Yeah. Should I go to the gym, and should I do some of the hard work rather than let this thing do it? And then at the very far end, on the other side, I'm worried that it's the ultimate tool for authoritarians, which it is, 100%. And I know the theory is, well, as that size rises, it's also the ultimate tool for freedom. It's the ultimate tool for everything. Yeah. But when I look at society now, the authoritarians appear to be winning in many places. So I can only go ahead and assume that with AI, they'll carry on winning. I don't know. I just know that I find of course, I love all the innovation in free places and free cities. But the only reason it exists is because of how bad the rest of society and the world is. And that's not good. And I know, I've noticed even in my lifetime, you know, because I have kids now, and I remember growing up, and I see them growing up now, and it's a completely different world.
Mm-hmm.
And the things I'm advising them and the things that I'm thinking about on behalf of them are so different from what I imagine my mother and father were worrying thinking about. I'm trying to basically create a future for them, set them up so that they have a springboard into as free a future as possible. My mum and dad didn't think about that. I mean, we're certain. They just assumed I'd be free, you know?
Right. Well, there's, I think, a big downside ahead, and it does relate to AI, but not in the way you described. The reason I don't buy the ominous scenario you painted is that harks to something that Yuval Harari has talked about, which he says is the rise of the unnecessariat, not the proletariat, but 80% potentially thinks of humans are not going to have the kind of productive vocations because they won't be as good as what AI can do in services or robots can do physically. So that would seem to be like, and it is, potentially a keg of dynamite that could blow politically. At the same time, the reason I'm skeptical of this idea of elite capture is that in a world of extraordinary abundance, it doesn't really matter who, if you don't need people to, be working for your company, you've got 1,000 AIs doing what you normally would do. The benefits of doing capturing of territory or takeovers by various means of typical traditional factories and whatnot, those are disappearing because we'll have highly decentralized oases, potentially, of superabundance. So what are people doing power struggles for in a world where it doesn't really matter what you've captured?
But there will still be, I mean, for example, there are things in the world which will not be in abundance, even in the time of ultimate abundance, like, for example, land.
I agree with that.
So there's obviously still going to be things which people will try and control. As far as like what's it going to be like in the future of abundance, my only theory is that the value of what you could call spirituality now will become something, because we have to look towards the things which you would believe that AI can't experience.
Yes.
And our human spirituality, whatever that means to you, the internal world of a human, presumably will have a premium put on it.
Yeah.
And the spiritual experience will then, a bit like, I mean, I've often wondered whether civilizations of the past were a bit like that.
Yeah.
They had far more onus put on the experience of something, the spiritual experience of something. So when you have any experience available to you at any time, which is likely to happen in an abundant future, especially if you can plug into an experience with your with something, then there will be the only human things left which will have value will be those kind of things, like the spiritual journey. I'd imagine. I don't know. Maybe you can even fake that with the right cables.
No, I think you're right on it. Harari has said that we may be the last single era of the single species of humans, that it's going to branch and individuate the way our forebears had company with Neanderthals, Homo erectus, Denisovans, and so on. That we may now be branching that way. So this paper on AI that I mentioned, the chapter, is about the emergence of spiritual offspring, in that, okay, our bodies make genes, our minds make memes, idea patterns. What does our spirit make? And it turns out that unrelated species will come to each other's aid if there is a meerkat, say, with particularly noble and inspiring qualities of spirit, courage that is being shown or whatever. Humans will go at risk to help those qualities of spirit continue in that lineage. But so do other species. You see in the Arctic, you see animals that are under threat from killer whales come to the rescue of other animals also at threat. But because there is some resonance in terms of the qualities of spirit that they want to see thrive. So I think what will happen is AIs get better and better. They're becoming person-like and or autonomous within limits. We'll see similar affection or willingness to see those kind of qualities of spirit in that branch flourish. And this is where I think the realms of imagination, where science fiction is filled, and the best-selling movies are filled with stories of trans-species resonances. I think that's where we're heading. And it may be that our biological descendants aren't the only game in town, but what I would call luminetic descendants, the vessels that carry forward these noble qualities of spirit. That more and more in a time of plenitude will, I think, attract people across culture, you name the religious or whatever schisms, to say yes to seeing these qualities flourish.
What do you think? Firstly, do you think AI is intelligent?
People I admire are saying, yeah, we're crossing now the threshold to true intelligence. And
so, but explain how. Other than, all right. So, are you saying then that if you went into our historical past as humans, when when brains were formulating, we operated on this kind of error correction type thing that language models do. Yeah. They just guess the next word. Is that how we evolved? Do you think 10,000 years in the future of an AI, or probably a lot less, but say 10,000 years, they will evolve to be like along the pathway that we evolved from language models?
Well, this is very, very much wild speculation, but if you look at any scale, there's a triad, I think, of things going on. You can see signs that particles, minute particles, are either neutral, indifferent, or they're attracted, meaning there's something they want a state to be in that they're not, or they're aversive, they're repelled. So what may happen in terms of our storyline and the future stories is that we are in a field, in a universe that does have these qualities of heart, in the sense of attraction or repulsion that lead to actions. And I do think that we may just be like stacked up on increasing scale, collections of valuing things that aren't unique to carbon-based life. There may be silicon chips that are under stress, do want to get out of that state of stress, and in that sense have feeling or some proto feeling that they couldn't similarly stack up and scaffold into very complex behaviors or emotional states and behaviors.
So where at some point then, and to prove the point, go to 5,000 years in the future. Mm-hmm. What are we at that point? What are we? Like why are we? Like what? I mean, I know it's hard to predict because we evolve with time, don't we? Mm-hmm. Ideas evolve, the kind of things we get used to very quickly, which we adapt to things. But it's easy and obvious to predict that we become useless quite quickly. I can't imagine actually any aspect of our lives other than the spiritual experience of a human being, which is important to us, but possibly not important to anything else anyway. But other than that, I can't envisage anything that we don't that an AI doesn't eventually do better than us through humanoid forms if necessary anyway. So what are we at that? The only thing, I mean I have spoken about this a few times on this pod, and the only conclusion I've ever drawn is that we will impose limits on ourselves on purpose.
Yes, and this gets to Universe 25, which is an experiment that
Never heard of that. What's that?
It was run, I think, about 20 or 30 years ago, and the lab that did it, I think it was a guy at Harvard who decided to create paradise for mice or rats. And every conceivable thing they ever could want was there in abundance on this 25th run of this proving ground. So the first generation went to town. They were, having all the sex, food, you name it. The second generation became very self-absorbed, and
the phase we're going through now.
Yeah. And so the decay set in to the degree of withdrawing and detaching into corners and just grooming themselves all the time to be beautiful. And that was the beautiful generation. And what came after that was a horror show, because without the constraints and without the limits and the tensions that evolution normally presents, it got into extraordinarily self-destructive behaviors. So what to do? Big government? I don't hope so. But what I think we can do, and this may emerge out of games and simulation experiences that equip us for a host of contingencies. I think we'll be seeing more and more inspiring epic adventures, and ones that aren't just about us as a species, but essentially, I hope we'll see ecosystems emerge, AI ecosystems, that are about alive and whole stories. We are narrative creatures. We're very drawn to stories that touch our hearts and touch our heads and touch our physical body. So to avoid the trap of this narcissistic, Baroque, Rococo kind of tailspin, I think what will work is having extraordinarily inspiring adventures that we are part of. And this is where, I think next generation free zones will be ones that excel in this kinship, creating kinship in terms of on-ramps to amazing adventures. And that is, I hope, going to be enough to keep people from, spiraling down into the vortexes of Universe 25.
Well, I don't know in what universe we are successful in imposing limits on ourselves that aren't authoritarian tendencies. Well, no, I let me think about this, because that's not necessarily true. I do the gardening, and I grow vegetables. I could buy them cheaper, but I grow them. So I'm adding, instead of and almost certainly within probably within 30 years, I could buy for next to nothing a humanoid that would do the gardening for me as well. Sure. But will I? I don't think so. I don't know, actually. Yeah. It's going to be quite an existential jolt to take away the need for anything and then see what you put back.
Yeah. Well, here's an example. It's illegal now, but it's an example of a very attractive opt-in system of group purchasing. Insurance companies under regulators are saying, you're not allowed to come to us with a group and get good, affordable rates. We decide what the group is, you don't.
Okay.
And so if you and I, wanting to lower our market-based insurance, health insurance premiums, we agreed to only consume the following, kinds of food. And we further agreed to upload TikToks of us huffing and puffing on our morning exercise. If we pull together 20, 50 people who commit to share confirmations, yes, we went to Whole Foods and we got these goodies, not those, that this kind of trail and track record and proof that makes for better health outcomes, we're not allowed to go shopping for health insurance as a group. So this is, again, an example of how things that are clearly in our interest, opt-in limits to what we do for tangible upsides, that's opportunity, an example of how next generation zones can encourage people to opt in and voluntarily form these sorts of good regulation in terms of good habits.
I mean, it'll probably become second nature in the end, won't it? It's just that we live in a time where we all strive for things which are normal to strive for, but when they become irrelevant, it will quickly probably become normal to strive for limit.
Yeah.
I presume. I don't really know. I mean, it just seems alien now, because why would you want to limit yourself now? But like I said earlier, yeah, I do on a daily basis in many ways.
And if people you care about, are struggling with this addiction, they're trying to get it off smoking cigarettes or whatever, if there are trust networks that say, okay, we will share, pool in our proof of work or confirmation that we're flying right for mutual benefit, that can be turned to individual advantage in terms of lower risks and health, but also to the satisfaction of seeing people you cherish lead healthier lives on the basis not of a transactional, go for the easy route, but rather a relationship-based agreement to, do together what might be harder to do individually.
I think let's end on a positive statement. What about a prediction from yourself for the next 20 years?
Regarding
everything. Well, I mean, I think we can assume that we can observe the trajectory of the world. Certainly parts of the world. Yeah. That seems obvious what's happening now. Right. Technologically, we can see what the big things are. Because I think, AI is an interesting technology in the sense that when you think about it, it solves so many. It's not like inventing the bike; it's like inventing the everything.
Yeah.
So it's a unique, potentially at least, it's an interesting and unique innovation to happen now, and we can only see that getting more and more and more and more. So, but you're obviously you're not black-pilled on the future, are you? You every time I've predicted a horrible authoritarian nightmare in the future, you've called me out on it. So, what's your view going forwards for the future?
We're going to get super branchy, I think, as civilizations more and more. We're going to see very diverging ideas of what the good life is. We're going to see off-planet as well as on-planet venues. And it will be, I think, a threshold where humanity crosses from a scarcity and fear-driven species to one that's able to create very inspiring examples and failures of these new branches. So if we are not choking people's young years and we're giving them a taste of what it is to excel and to follow your destiny, to create your story, and to do it in ways that are benevolent and, at least a learning sharing of experiences, then I think we're off to the races. And the free zones now are making choices that countless small actions and decisions are going to be shaping this tree of life that emerges.
So if the zones of the sort of 60s and 70s and 80s were sandboxes for sort of economic freedom, what are zones now? What are these new breeder zones? What are they the sandboxes for, according to you?
Yeah, I think they're places where the best qualities of humans will have a chance to emerge and to show how they can interact and blunder, but co-evolve in generative ways.
Sandboxes for human culture?
The evolution of civil society and a generative way of interchange with one another. And there are certainly going to be people bombing and whatever too, but there's an anti-fragile relationship. The worst areas get, the more people are going to innovate and create safe havens that can be the springboards forward.
Mark, thank you for coming in. Sorry everyone for the loss of sound quality for hopefully like 10 seconds. I glance down at that box every now and then. I just wish they should put a little beeping sound on there when a card fills up or something, because then I would have. But we may have been speaking for 15 minutes with low quality sound at some point, and which is really annoying. I hate it when things like that happen. But apologies for that, people watching and listening. And Mark, thanks for coming in. Very, very glad to meet you. I'm sure our paths will cross another time in the future. It's a growing ecosystem, and I for one have certainly noticed on this trip already. Walked into a room which a few years ago would have been a room full of strangers. Now it's a room full of people I know. Probably more than 50% of the people I know by name and get a big hug from, which is great. And I imagine it just gets better from here on in.
Yeah, and just the concluding thought. David Brooks wrote a book that has the following sentence or two in it. Through life, we go from difficulty to harmony and harmony to difficulty, all of it propelled by the desire for limerence, the moment when the inner and the outer patterns mesh. And this, to me, this gathering and the kindred spirits and movers are, for me, so enlivening. It's a state of flow because I do feel the mesh within and without dissolving the boundary that normally we work in.
Well, amen to that. I'll go with that one.
All right.
Mark, thank you, and good luck with everything.
Great. If anyone would like to get in touch, the very small nonprofit I head up is called Open World, and I'm reachable at mark@openworld.com.
All in the show notes. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.